Beyond the Gates spoilers for Thursday, September 11, 2025 tease that Allison has the first tremors of a mind beginning to splinter. A woman who has been arrested but cannot accept her arrest as anything other than an interruption in a story whose lines only she can remember. The scene opens with fluorescent lights humming like a distant verdict, a stark interrogation room inside a courthouse that smells of coffee and antiseptic and the depleted adrenaline of dozens of other confessions. Allison sits with her wrists cuffed in front of her, the soft fabric of her sleeves crinkling at the edges where the metal bites into her skin. The camera lingers on small details that others would miss, the small scar under her jaw, the way her fingernails are bitten into pale crescents, the small smile line that appears when she looks at a photo on her lap, a photo that only she considers a fabricated truth. She does not understand why she was taken. To everyone else, the case looks simple enough on paper. Allison Dupree, detained on suspicion of abducting Chelsea Dupree, social media star and spouse of Madison Royce. But for Allison, reality is a palimpsest. She reads beneath the lines, interprets the spaces, assigns weight to gestures, and finds an internal logic that resists outside interpretation. In her mind, the world has an order. Chelsea is hers. They were married. The vows were exchanged in a secret that she has never fully revealed to anyone. That private certainty is what keeps her upright when official Dim Jacob, the cop who once was more ally than adversary, places the cuffs on her wrists and speaks of charges in tones that are meant to be both procedural and final. Jacob is a study in restraint. He knows Allison better than a typical arresting officer knows a suspect. He knows the cadence of her sentences. He knows the way she can look at someone like a lighthouse focusing its beam and believe that beam will change tides. He has already felt the gravity of her certainties pull at the steady orbit of the town. He reads the report, the kidnapping allegations, the social media evidence, the witnesses, and still there's a pause in him where compassion leaks through his badge. That pause will be important later, when loyalty and duty are asked to live in the same room. The prison meeting is staged like an emblematic collision between two kinds of truth. Chelsea sits in a visitor's chair that is too big for her delicate frame. The chair's metal arms glint like practiced defenses. Madison stands slightly behind her, a shield of grace and controlled acidity. Their presence together is a message curated, recognized, meant to wound and to heal simultaneously. Allison enters and for a beat the room narrows to three faces. She smiles because in the private script she carries with her, this is the scene where Chelsea apologizes, where the world rightens, where the stolen hours are returned and promises are retied like ribbons. Chelsea's reaction is not apology but iron. She sees Allison and sees an accusation, the idea that her life could belong to someone else. Chelsea's hands clench. Her air is trimmed with rage and humiliation, rage at the spectacle publicized across her feeds and humiliation at being used as a pawn in someone else's narrative. When Allison says her name like a bomb, Chelsea recoils. Words have been weaponized between them. What Allison calls memory, Chelsea calls obsession. The exchange is harsh. Chelsea lashes out verbally, slicing through Allison's denials with the laceration of fact. Madison's presence aggravates Allison in a way physical threats cannot. Madison is the reason wordless claims matter. She is the figure who proves that the life Allison thought shared with Chelsea belonged to a different ledger. To Allison, Madison feels like a theft enacted in daylight. Chelsea, furious and precise, leans in and kisses Madison, a demonstration that is both intimate and exculpatory. She does it publicly, with a theatrical tenderness meant to leave no room for doubt. The kiss is a performance of ownership, an exclamation point to the conversation, "We are not yours, Allison." The kiss lands like a bell, loud, resonant, accusatory. Allison's reaction is not calculated but animal. Desperation becomes motion. She lunges. The attempt is beautiful and terrifying, a woman attempting to seize the proof of her wrongness back into her world. Madison is shocked and instinctively flinches. Jacob, faster than anyone imagined, is at Allison's side. He pins her arms with hands that are steady because they've held other things: a baby when he had to, a partner when he needed to, a suspect when he had to. He is careful with her, but he is firm. Chelsea watches and repeats, not in malice so much as in a blunt plea that what Allison believes is a construction. It is not mutual. It's only in your head, Chelsea says, each syllable an attempt to be merciful by telling a desperate woman the only thing that might stabilize her, the truth. Even if the truth is a kind of abandonment. The scene is a microscope on delusion and love and public spectacle. For the viewers, there is an itch. How do you care for a person who cannot be convinced of harm when that person's hands have caused harm? The writers linger on the ethical crossroad. Arrest is necessary. Yet so is the question of how to care for a mind that insists upon its own coherence. This confinement becomes a mirror for Allison, exposing layers of her psyche in unequal lights. Alone in a cell, she narrates the past not as a chronology of behaviors but as a sequence of validations denied to her by others. Each memory: the first time Chelsea called her at 2 in the morning, the quiet inequality of their arguments, the night they supposedly married in a motel chapel, becomes a litany of proof in Allison's head. She catalogues moments and arranges them into a thesis. Chelsea belongs to her because she remembers the tenderness that Chelsea does not acknowledge. She believes love is property, and property must be reclaimed, even if the reclaiming is performed at the expense of another's autonomy. This is the heart of Allison's pathology in dramatic terms, an insistence on an internal reality that privileges subjective truth over shared reality. It is both tragic and terrifying. Tragic because Allison cannot see the harm she does. Terrifying because her insistence can manifest in danger not only to herself but to Chelsea, Madison, and anyone who stands in for what she has lost. Parallel to Allison's unraveling, life outside the cell hums with its own complicated reconciliations. The fathers of Samantha and Tyrell, two men who carried anger like a second skin after a fractious period, find their way back to each other. The reconciliation is not an immediate salvation. Rather, it is a slow thawing of ice that had built up over months. Smitty, whose face has held the hard edges of betrayal, a man who once shouted accusations in the rain, sits across from Martin and learns to let language move from accusation to explanation. Martin's apologies are not theatrical, they are small, practical admissions of mistakes followed by the labor of atonement, showing up, helping without being asked, not making excuses when resentment rears its head. Time passes in the way television loves to compress, days into montages, seasons into new skirts. With the passage, both men begin to stitch their daily patterns back into a shared rhythm. They go fishing together, first silent, then with conversations that start banal and slowly cut toward the tender, grandparents' jokes, shared childhood embarrassments, the infuriating stubbornness of a neighbor. The pace at which forgiveness returns is important. It illustrates one of the show's subtler themes, that community repair is a set of small acts repeated until trust forms again. Smitty does not simply forgive Martin in a single, tearful scene. He watches him by his side in a hospital ward. He sees Martin protect a grandchild, and he begins to understand that the man is not the worst of his mistakes. Those cumulative observations create a soil where forgiveness can grow. In the drawing rooms of Fairmont Crest, gossip is both weapon and salve. The town loves a pair that arrives on the scene and threatens to become something more. BTG teases that another couple will edge closer, an announcement that sends the rumor mill into spinning overdrive. Everyone has a candidate. The camera watches as residents of Fairmont Crest speculate obsessively at wine-stained lunch tables and in candlelit cocktail parties. They trade glances and thin smiles, trying hard not to show how invested they are in the prospective union. The possibility of romance is addictive. It promises new alliances and new betrayals and, above all, distraction from one's own imperfect life. Two relationships are specifically in focus right now. Ted and Nicole appear not to be the prospective couple. Nicole has been making a slow, convincing turn toward Carlton, Ted's partner in business and, increasingly, the person who holds her steady. Their collaboration has always been more than professional: long nights over shifting ledgers, shared secrets about the state of Fairmont Crest's old money, and the small, private jokes they exchange that mean nothing to others but everything to them. Nicole's progression with Carlton is polite yet charged. There is tenderness in their interactions, steady, mutual, the kind earned through proximity and shared interest, and it disallows the town from easily assigning them into the well-worn archetype of the illicit pair. They are respectable in the way they hold their hands at the edges of each other's stories. Meanwhile, Danny and Bill have been seen in moments of quiet closeness that set Haley's teeth on edge. The two have been carving out small islands of intimacy, a conversation that lingers over coffee, a hand on a shoulder that becomes longer in duration than propriety would normally allow. Those moments are not always sexual. Very often they are emotional transgressions. They speak about things they cannot speak to others about. They laugh in private. They find in each other a listener who doesn't invoke family politics. Haley watches these interactions like a hawk. Jealousy is not always the boiling, shattering kind. Sometimes it is a distilled, corrosive thing that robs color from a life and makes every small affection significant and dangerous. Naomi steps into this framework not as a non-looker but as someone with a vested interest. She warns Bill not to raise false hopes in her mother. The subtext in that small admonition is layered. Someone else, Naomi's mother, has been allowed to dream about Bill in ways that were never promised. Naomi knows the gravity of disappointment because she has watched people set their lives, their afternoons, their conversations around a future that was only a mirage. Her admonition to Bill is practical and severe: do not embroil the vulnerable in a fantasy you cannot deliver. That warning is not merely about propriety, it is a plea against the kind of cruelty that comes from allowing the elderly and the lonely to imagine a future only to snatch it away with a tossed-off apology. There is also the caution about Haley, a smaller, cold-blooded note of concern. Naomi suggests keeping an eye on Haley because she might be calculating. In social circles like Fairmont Crests, calculating is a euphemism that can mean many things: an emergent strategy to secure status, to gain leverage, to preserve social capital. Naomi believes Haley may be working a longer plan than anyone suspects. Perhaps she desires security and sees Bill as a means to that safety. Naomi's warning is a strategic nudge. It's less about morality and more about survival in a place where marriages are as much currency as affection. All these intimate maneuvers play out in a town where privacy is a small commodity traded for influence. The writers make a point of showing the mechanics of gossip: how a bartender listens to cheerfully slurred confidences, how a neighbor pretends not to eavesdrop while mentally filing the names mentioned into the ledger of future social eligibility. Each whispered speculation can be a seed that grows into a scaffolding for the next scandal. It's a social ecology where alliances change with the weather, and every rapprochement or rumored rapprochement is both a potential boon and a political liability. Amid all this social maneuvering, Thomas and Eva move toward each other like two quiet boats being pulled to the same pier by an invisible current. Thomas is sensible in the way of people who have learned to love through loss. He listens in a way that refracts attention back at the speaker, making them feel seen. Eva comes to him with stories about her mother that are both delicate and indelible. She cannot speak of the woman without the words trembling. Her mother is with her in a way that maps eagle feather memories onto the present. Her mother was a seamstress who taught patience, a woman who loved fiercely but without show. Eva's telling is not exposition, it is revelation. Each memory is a place she testifies from: the particular warmth of tea on a winter morning, the way her mother would smooth a burned blouse and say, with a shrug, that life keeps sewing up its own tears. When Eva shares these moments with Thomas, the exchanges are a kind of intimacy that bypasses surface flirtation. They speak of pain and of small triumphs. Thomas responds with the gentleness of someone who knows that telling is a risk and listening is a gift. That dynamic moves them closer. There is a scene written with careful restraint where they sit in Eva's kitchen, the light over the sink washing the room in something like mercy. They are both slightly inebriated on storytelling, words loosen, eyes soften. Thomas reaches for her hand, and the contact registers not as a spark so much as an accommodation of comfort. The first kiss is tentative, almost apologetic, as if both parties know they are crossing a threshold that won't be easily reversed. The question of whether they'll have sex is teased with classical soap suspense. The series handles physical intimacy with an eye for consequence rather than mere eroticism. If the show lets them move beyond the single kiss, It will be because both characters need to be held in a sanctuary where vulnerabilities can be shared without the immediate political cost. The scene that follows their closeness is shot in a way that focuses on the left-behind objects: an unwashed coffee mug, a pressed floral scarf, as if to prove tenderness by the residue it leaves behind. Their potential union is less a headline and more a careful assembly of mutual repair. Someone learning to trust being seen and someone learning to see. Meanwhile, a quieter tension grows under the surface. Who among Fairmont Crest will be the next to rise and who will fall? The town's social economy has been disrupted by Allison's arrest because it reframes narratives of victimhood and agency. People who once thought themselves untouchable begin to check their mirrors more often. The social order recalibrates towards safety and suspicion. Who will be implicated? Who will be exonerated? Who will profit from the shifting alliances? The writers place characters into situations where their decisions will reveal deeper appetites: the urge to cling to power, the need to be loved at any cost, the desire to be seen as morally intact. Back inside the jail, Allison's confinement sharpens into a particular kind of creative pathology. She begins to write not ordinary notes but scripts, scenes she imagines will one day be proof of the life she insists she had. She transcribes moments like diary entries for an audience of one, then folds the papers into origami shapes and leaves them in her pillowcase. The act of writing steadies her. Language is the scaffold that keeps her sense of self from falling into chaos. When the guards find the folded pages, they read them and are unnerved by the specificity, the dates, the private jokes, the descriptions of Chelsea that read like a lover cataloging details in an attempt to claim them. The material is not evidence in the legalistic sense, but it is the only thing that concretizes Allison's private world for anyone else to see. It tempts empathy, and with empathy often comes complication. How do you prosecute a person who writes with such aching conviction? The town's narrative machines, tabloids, neighborhood podcasts, and social feeds react predictably. Some interpreters see Allison as a dangerous stalker, others read her as a damaged woman who has been failed by a system that doesn't know how to hold the mentally ill. Chelsea, for her part, is roundly supported by fans and by the community, but even her fans ask questions in the small hours. Had she always been guarded with Allison? Did she ever show signs of reciprocation that might have encouraged confusion? The landscape of public opinion is messy. It invites reflection on the thin line between love and possession, between caring and claiming. Each character's response to the scandal becomes a mirror that reveals what they most value. Madison is sober and defensive. She holds Chelsea close, not in spectacle but in weary, practical love, as if the act will inoculate Chelsea against rumor. Jacob is torn between professional duty and the personal history that complicates his perception. Danny and Bill's clandestine closeness becomes a safety valve for both. Their moments of intimacy are less a betrayal than a mutual refuge in a community that has suddenly become more dangerous to vulnerability. Naomi's warnings are both protective and strategic. She is a gatekeeper who understands how fragile dreams are when wielded as social currency. As the camera lingers over these entanglements, it becomes clear that the show is less interested in a courtroom drama and more invested in the anatomy of truth, how it is constructed, who is allowed to own it, and what happens when the structures that normally hold truth together, families, institutions, reputations, begin to wobble. The early episodes focus on creating pressure. Characters are heated in a pot until something must give: a confession, a revelation, a betrayal. The audience is asked to watch the slow-motion collision and to feel the ethical discomfort of rooting for a character who may be both victim and perpetrator. The power of these early arcs is not merely in their melodrama but in their insistence on nuance. The show refuses to make simple moral judgments. Instead, it forces the viewer to live inside the tension, to understand Allison's loneliness and not excuse the harm, to feel for Chelsea's humiliation and not dismiss the human cost of obsession. It does this by paying attention to the small moments: a hand that lingers too long on a shoulder, a note left in a coat pocket, a voicemail deleted before it can be played, moments that signal a kind of private truth that cannot be easily represented in the glare of cameras and court dockets. As days in the narrative tick by, The town begins to imagine futures. Haley sits alone at a cafe, tracing the rim of a teacup and thinking about the small domesticities she wants for herself. Danny sits with Bill on a stoop as the sun goes down, exchanging stories that read like prefaces to a life they may or may not share. Thomas and Eva read old postcards together, wonderings whispering of more tender mappings. Smitty and Martin plant a small tree in a yard that once witnessed shouting matches, then shake soil from their gloves and agree on a way to celebrate birthdays that will not be appropriated by anger. The show expands its social canvas by underscoring how rumors metastasize. Every whisper becomes a seed, every seed a shrub, every shrub a hedge to be crossed or hidden behind. The writing emphasizes the human cost of spectacle. A character like Allison is at once a villain in some narratives and a wounded soul in others. The storytelling chooses to dwell in the grayness. There is technique to the storytelling that merits note. The show interleaves present action with rounded, retrospective scenes that illuminate motive without excusing behavior. The camera will cut to Allison's memory of a rooftop night when Chelsea lay in her arms and said nothing, a scene that in Allison's memory is a vow. Then it will cut to Chelsea's recollection of the same night as awkwardness and retreat. The contrast is where the tragedy is. Two people occupying the same space and walking away with different truths. Those interleavings expand the narrative not by inventing more plot but by deepening the psychology behind ordinary events. By the time the early arc episodes accumulate, the stage is set for multiple convergences. Cases will be reopened, alliances will be tested, and old secrets will slither into the light. But for now, the show wants the audience to sit in suspense, to watch the arrested woman writing in the dark, to witness the fathers reconciling in small, honest acts, to feel the flush of new affections that might either heal or complicate everything. The first half of the story is not an ending but a slow tightening. It is about the world being made taut with promise and peril at once. This opening sweep is also an invitation to ethical attention. The viewer must decide, will you see Allison as a criminal deserving condemnation, or as a patient deserving care? Will you sympathize with Chelsea's indignation or wonder whether fame sometimes creates a mirror that amplifies misunderstandings? Those questions are what the early episodes ask aloud, again and again, while the characters busy themselves clearing their schedules to either defend or accuse. And while none of the outward conflicts are resolved yet, the narrative pressure builds like a storm. The last image before the first break is deliberately ambiguous. Allison in a dim cell, folding another paper, her handwriting a steady ribbon, the lines of ink a quiet insistence that what she remembers is real. Outside, the Fairmont Crest skyline glows with the soft lights of people who sleep unaware but not for long. The narrative leaves us on a knife edge, a place where every character's next choice will have consequences that cannot be undone.